I'm Caroline Dowd-Higgins. Thank you for listening to Your Working Life, my podcast series featuring thought leaders in the career and personal growth arena. You spend a significant portion of your life at work, so I'm on a mission to provide you with tools, inspiration, and resources so you can enjoy your career and love your life. And I am delighted to welcome my very special guest to the show today, Beth Buelow. Beth, welcome.
Thanks, Carolyn. I'm excited to be here.
I'm delighted to have you, and we're going to dive into a juicy conversation, but I want to tell our listening audience about you. Beth Buelow serves as a guide to introvert entrepreneurs who want to amplify their strengths and build sustainable, energetically aligned businesses. She is a professional coach, author, podcaster, and speaker, and she's based in the Pacific Northwest and serves introverts worldwide. Beth is the author of Insight, Reflections on the Gifts of Being an Introvert, and the forthcoming The Introvert Entrepreneur. Amplify your strengths and create success on your own terms. And I'm thrilled. This book is coming in November, and we'll have to have you back on the show, Beth, to talk about the launch of the book. But let's give our listening audience a taste of what's coming. So, how did you decide to write this new book?
It came about really out of the work that I've been doing in my business. You know, as a coach and as an introvert, my energy is very precious to me. And I think what motivates a lot of coaches, consultants, and other people who have a big message to share, I think what motivates them to write a book is that they want to reach as many people as possible in the most efficient way as possible. So that was part of it. Is I felt like there was this really important message that I wanted introverts to hear about the importance of embracing who they are, you know, having awareness, embracing who they are, accepting and honoring it. And then for those that have that entrepreneurial impulse and calling, you know, how can they step fully into that and create something that they're going to be successful at while doing it, as the subtitle of the book says, on their own terms. So it was really about trying to, you know, take the lessons that I've learned myself as a business owner, as well as what I've learned from my clients, and trying to distill it and distribute it to as many people as possible so that we can have more, you know, really strong introvert entrepreneurs out there in the world.
Fantastic. And I am a champion of introverts. I am an extrovert myself. However, as a coach, I've learned how important it is to understand the nuances of personality. And I imagine you're also trained and certified in the Myers-Briggs. However, I would love for you to unpack introvert and extroversion for our audience.
Sure. Well, as most people know, especially who have taken the Myers-Briggs, introversion and extroversion are two of the traits that are measured, for lack of a better word, or assessed. And it happens that introversion and extroversion, it transcends Myers-Briggs. It is a trait or a characteristic that is assessed across a variety of personality assessments. So it's really core to thinking about who we are. I like to think of introversion and extroversion less as personality traits and more as energetic traits. And here's why. Because when we talk about it in terms of personality, we tend to collapse other words with introvert and extrovert that don't necessarily truly define what they mean. So let me ask you, when I say the word introvert, what personality trait usually would bubble up from that word for you?
Well, as a coach, I'm probably not going to tell you what you want to hear because for me, I understand. Well,
yes,
okay, so for me, I understand it.
Public?
Well, there we go. So let me first say, most people are going to probably say quiet, reserved, and I loved how you said energy is precious. And as a coach, I would say someone that spends that energy needs to recharge their batteries, right? And take that time to refuel that energy.
Yeah. And so that quiet, reserved, and shy is the other word that comes up almost 100% of the time. You know, those are things that can be true of an introvert, but they are not the defining characteristics of an introvert. So as I was saying, it's really about the energy. And so introverts will gain energy from solitude, from, solitary activity or quiet, lower stimulation environments, whereas they will drain energy during social interaction. That does not mean that there aren't social introverts,
Right.
introverts who really do love social interaction. It's simply that it takes all of their energy to be in that situation and to be taking care of themselves and to be having fun. Whereas an extrovert will gain energy through those interactions. So that's the difference. And sometimes it's, the reason why I think on the surface it shows up really where people think that an introvert doesn't like social situations or is socially inept in some way. A lot of the times it's an energy issue,
Yes.
not a social anxiety issue.
And I really appreciate your definitions, Beth. I think that is so helpful to the listening audience. And I will also say in the career development realm, I think quite often introverts are misunderstood. So thank you for championing them and helping the extroverts who work with them better understand them.
Yeah, I think it's the key to world peace. Or at least
Brilliant. That
one
should
of
be
the keys.
that should be the subtitle of your book.
Yeah, exactly. Yes.
Oh gosh.
Yeah.
So what if, right? What if we don't strongly identify with one or the other? What if we hug the middle?
Yeah, that middle ground is called an ambivert. And so that means you kind of have a foot in both worlds. You are almost equally energized by solitude and equally energized by people, and you have the potential to be draining energy in either of those places. So you kind of have that, like I said, a foot in both worlds. And I should say that with the introversion and extroversion, we are all on a spectrum. Everyone, no matter how strongly you identify with one or the other, has for lack of a better way of putting it, opposite energy within them. So even though I am, a tried and true introvert, I have extrovert energy within me. It's just that it is a much lesser degree than it,
Hmm.
for you, Carolyn. And
Hmm.
even you have introvert energy in you. It's
Absolutely.
just that the extrovert is dominant.
Hmm.
So it's important to understand that it's not a black and white kind of thing. It's a spectrum. And that those ambiverts, even the ambiverts, my guess is if you really, really pressed them, they would probably demonstrate a preference. If I were to say, you're exhausted, your energy is depleted, how do you recharge yourself? And they would probably, choose one or the other. And
Yeah,
that might give you a little inkling that they lean
right.
one way or the other.
Right. And I think that's a great explanation of that forced choice. What is your dominant feature? So good
Mhm.
illustration. So I think that the strengths of introverts are really extraordinary. And I would love for you to lay those out and really define those for our listeners.
Yeah, there are so many strengths to being an introvert. A lot of it is just owning it. We have a we have a calming presence for a lot of people. I think it's because we tend to be good listeners.
Yeah.
One of the things that is so rare in our society, at least here in the United States, is that people actually really, really listen, and that you are with the person you're with, you're seeing and hearing them. And I think introverts tend to be those good listeners. They tend to be the people that have had other folks say to them, "Wow, I just met you 5 minutes ago, but I just told you my life story."
Mm.
So I think it's because we tend to not necessarily. It's a kind of a double-edged thing. I think we do like to listen and we are curious, but it's also we don't necessarily enjoy talking about ourselves, and so it's a little bit easier to turn the spotlight on somebody else, which is also a strength. I think is that we can really put the attention outward towards the person we're talking to or the project we're working on or the organization or company that we're working for. So we're motivated internally, but we're also motivated by not necessarily looking for the spotlight. Does
And
that make sense?
it does. And you can't see me, but I'm smiling ear to ear because active listening is a skill and it
It
can be
is.
so challenging for extroverts. And I say that with my hand in the air. We always want to chime in. And I agree with
Mm.
you. Introverts are beautiful listeners.
Yeah, yeah, and they tend to want to dive deep into things as opposed to going broad.
Hmm.
So they're, wanting to really dig into that project, one or two projects instead of working on five or six. And and they tend to be good synthesizers, and that goes along with that listener. So they might, the introvert is that person in the group meeting that might not say much, but they're taking really good notes. They're thinking, processing everything, and they're probably going to be the one at the end of the meeting that says, "Well, have you thought about this?"
Yeah.
And it makes everybody stop, and they
Yeah.
go, "Oh,
The light
we
bulb
hadn't thought
moment.
about that."
Right.
Yeah, yeah. So, sometimes as we're talking about these strengths, it's like with any strengths with anyone, there's always a flip side. And so that, being quiet and thinking through the meeting can also be construed as not participating. So it's really important, I think, for introverts, again, to understand what's going on and how they're being perceived by others, and being able to be willing to have conversations or be transparent about what works best for them in terms of how they contribute to the workplace, to family life, to whatever groups they're in.
So let's segue, Beth, to entrepreneurship and your new
Sure.
book. Why is entrepreneurship so appealing for many introverts?
I think one of the core reasons I've heard time and time again is independence, a sense of wanting some freedom. And this is probably true for a lot of entrepreneurs in general. I mean, I think entrepreneurs in general value freedom. But for introverts, they felt either misunderstood or marginalized, or they weren't getting ahead in the way they wanted to in a traditional workplace, especially if they were in a career or an environment or culture that was very extrovert oriented. And so there was a certain amount of frustration with that, and feeling like, I'm being misunderstood here, and I have this calling, this pull, this vision to do something else, and I want to do it on my own. I'm convinced it was probably an introvert who said, if you want it done right, do it yourself. And so I
Claim
think
it.
a lot of them, yeah, just claim it, and I think a lot of introverts are in those kinds of jobs, and especially ones who go into more consulting or coaching or service oriented, where they're working with and for someone else, and they say, I have too many ideas. I can do this better on my own, or
Yeah.
I'd have more energy to devote to actually uh, doing my craft if I didn't have to deal with the people too.
Yeah, yeah,
If I didn't
absolutely.
have to deal with bosses or coworkers. So,
Right.
so there's not a simple answer to that question. I think it varies. It would be different for every introvert entrepreneur you talk to, but I do think that there's an underlying sort of thing that happens when they're in that corporate world and they feel called towards entrepreneurship, where they say, I'm not fitting in here,
Mhm.
and so it's time to make something that does fit me.
So, when one does take the leap to become an entrepreneur, if one is an introvert, what are the keys to success? Because entrepreneurial careers are tough, and I'm not saying that introverts can't do it, but for anybody and of any stripe, you've got
Right.
to be scrappy and tenacious and resilient.
Absolutely. Resilience, I think, is one of the key things. You've got to be able to bounce back and, ride the ups and downs, the ebbs and flows, and that includes cash and energy
Hmm.
and work. And so I think for introverts, when you read that intro, you talked about energetically aligned businesses.
Yeah.
That to me is part of the key, that you are creating something that is aligned with your energy. So for introverts, that's not going to look like going to networking events every week or every day, or that
Maybe
sort of
at
thing.
all.
It's or at
Yeah.
all. I mean, I have to admit, I don't think I've been to a networking event in months, but that doesn't mean that I'm not networking in different ways.
Exactly.
you
Exactly.
know so you have to find ways of doing sales, doing self promotion, doing networking, all of those external activities. You need to be know yourself well enough that you can find a way to implement those very necessary activities, but to do it according to your own energy, according to your own strengths, as opposed to those dreaded shoulds. I should be out there networking every day, or I should be cold calling, or any of those things. You might end up doing those things, but it's important that they're not shoulds. They need to be want tos.
Yeah, and I believe that you need to be comfortable in your own skin and do it in a way that
Yes.
resonates with you and plays to your strengths.
Absolutely. So happy hour networking, not so much. But networking at a conference, that's rather different, because everybody's gathered for a similar cause. There's a central idea that people can be talking about, and so there's structure. So that's just one example of how, yes, you network, but you choose what type of event is going to show you off at your best.
Excellent. So, Beth, do you think there's wisdom for introverts or extroverts to surround themselves and build their teams with opposite types?
I think that there is value in that. I think it's less about similar, birds of a feather or opposites attract. And it's more about finding someone that has that energy sensibility that aligns with you. So I think everyone that I'm teamed up with right now are all introverts. Yet what works about it is that we each know our own special strengths and our skills. And the most important thing, besides just honoring what those skills are and those strengths, is that we're communicating with each other, which could be kind of the downfall of an all introvert team. But if you know it, then you can work to develop that piece of it and be transparent about it. Sometimes people will say, well, if you're an introvert and you don't like sales, we'll just pair up with an extrovert. Yes and no.
I was waiting to hear how you were going to tackle that. Go for it.
Did I paint myself into a hole?
No, it's all good. I'm eager to hear.
Yeah, well, it's yes and no. It's less I think about the introvert extrovert and more just about how do you feel with that person? Do you feel safe? Do you feel like you have complementary skills? Do you have mutual respect and trust? Have you outlined clear expectations with how you're going to work together? And, for an introvert working with an extrovert, the introvert might say, okay, good, go little extrovert, you can go do your thing. And I'll just sit back here and churn out the reports. And, that's not going to necessarily be a formula for success. There still needs to be, mutual input and activity and whatnot. So it's just finding what the strengths are and being willing to learn from each other. So kind of a roundabout answer to that.
Yeah, it worked. I like it. And
yeah.
I love your term energy sensibility. That's really beautiful. So is that in the forthcoming book? Because that is a brilliant, brilliant term. You need to trademark that.
I need to, yeah. It's funny when I do interviews like this, and I think it's because introverts are not verbal processors. Sometimes things pop out of my mouth that I don't know where they came from. So there you go. There's one of them.
Okay, well, you claim it, my dear, because it is brilliant.
Energy sensibility.
Yeah, it's good stuff. I wrote it down, so definitely claim it. So what other advice do you have for introverted entrepreneurs? Because, running a business effectively is a challenge for anyone. But let's drill down because this is the expertise in the new book. Tell us about running the business.
Yeah, it's first about, again, I'll just reiterate that it's around that honoring who you are and respecting your energy, being firm in who you are and what you need, and not being apologetic or dismissive of those needs. Because one of the things I say is a fake extrovert is just that. It's a fake extrovert. So you're not going to succeed I'm not a fan of the fake it till you make it. And I know that lots of people would disagree with me on that, but I believe more in, being really true to who you are and cultivating the skills and pulling on your inner resources that you might not even realize you had, that of course come out through things like coaching,
Sure.
that can help you create and reclaim the story of who you are and what you have to offer. So I think first and foremost, it's really about self-acceptance and being good to yourself, respecting and trusting yourself. That's so huge. And it doesn't have to do with your balance sheet, directly, or your marketing strategies or your social media. So much of it I say in my tagline, success is an inside job. So, I feel like 80% of whether you succeed or fail as an introvert entrepreneur has to do with your own mindset, attitude, approach, and as you were saying before, like things like perseverance and resilience. So it's also has to do with what I say is, not playing the introvert card.
Yeah.
So while you still own that introversion, don't use it as an excuse for not doing certain things or for, certain habits. There is a certain amount of skill cultivation that needs to happen if we want to succeed. We can't be hermits in a cave and still have a business. So it's important to recognize where you need to develop skills, and then please, reach out and get help for that. Again, we come back to that feeling of independence of, I can do it myself. If I don't know how, I can learn. I've come I've come across a lot of introverts, including myself, who consider themselves Swiss Army knives.
Oh,
So it's like, oh, I need to build a new
I
website.
can
Okay,
do it
I can learn
all.
how to do that. And I think one of the keys to success of creating that energetically sustainable and energetically aligned business is that you are reaching out for help, getting the right partners on board, cultivating the skills that you need, recognizing where you don't have them and that where you need them, and then doing it.
Love it.
It's as simple as that. Don't think about it. Don't say, well, someday I'll get a virtual assistant.
All right, do it.
Just do it. And
Yeah,
and often, and this transcends introvert extrovert, but often it's easier, less expensive, less time consuming than you think.
I
And it
agree.
can save you a tremendous amount of energy.
Right. And it helps you focus on what only you can do, right? So you
Yes.
can
Yes.
perform at that high level of expertise. So,
Yes.
Beth, wrapping up, what are some ways that introverts can manage their energy? You talked about energy sensibility. How
Yeah.
does one manage it? Because it is a precious commodity.
I think first it's important to recognize what your own rhythms are. It's taken me years to figure out when I do my best thinking, when I do my best with my clients, when I do my best writing, when I'm just flat out tired, and can't do anything. Lots of people, lots of introverts that I've talked to will say, well, I need, they kind of know their people to private ratio.
Hmm.
So for every 1 hour of people, I need 2 hours of private time.
Hmm.
Or for
Okay.
every 1 hour of people, I need 4 hours of private time. If you know that ratio, then you can plan a little bit better and you won't find yourself in these, burned out and, kind of feeling useless energetically. You will be able to, when we say balance, it doesn't mean equal. I think it
Hmm.
means that
Hmm.
you've got, the right ratio that's going to make you do your best. So I think it's to recognize, okay, if I go to that 1 hour networking event, I need to make sure I have 2 hours of downtime. And that can have different repercussions. It might mean, well, I don't go to, my friend's party, or I have to tell my husband I think I'm going to take a walk by myself,
Hmm.
or whatever it might be. There's boundaries that you need to figure out, and need to figure out how to talk about them with people, again, in a way that is not defensive or apologetic, but just, this is what I need. It kind of goes along with that, putting on your own oxygen mask first,
Right.
which is a very overused cliche, but it's
But it works.
overused for a reason.
Yeah. I would agree. I love your fundamental theme of self-advocacy, right? Looking out
Yeah.
for
Yeah.
yourself.
Yeah. Because, nobody else is going to look out for us.
So
Um,
true. So true.
yeah. And there's nothing like entrepreneurship to cause you to look in the mirror and see who you really are.
And
And when you
stretch your
see who you
limits.
are and stretch your limits, and when you see that and you believe in yourself, then it's important that you become your own best advocate.
Beautifully put. Beth, what a delight to have you on the show. I'm really excited about the forthcoming book, The
Thank you.
Introvert Entrepreneur. Amplify your strengths and create success on your own terms. And it's coming in November of 2015. Please share your website and how we can connect with you on social media.
Sure. You can find me online at theintrovertentrepreneur.com. I'm excited to share that, at least at the time we're recording this on early June, that I'll be having a new website launching in just a week or two. So
Great.
I really hope that people will visit and leave a few comments. There you will find information about both the forthcoming book, The Introvert Entrepreneur, as well as my first book, Insight Reflections on the Gifts of Being an Introvert. The book is available for pre-sale right now on Amazon and on the iTunes, bookstore. And on social media, my most active platform is Facebook. So if you go to Facebook, facebook.com/or / the introvert entrepreneur, and you can find me on Twitter at introvert coach. So those are the best ways to connect. And of course, you mentioned before, I'm a podcaster. So
Yes.
I love having new listeners, and would invite anyone to go onto iTunes and do a search for The Introvert Entrepreneur and become a subscriber.
And you have great content, so I
Oh,
wholly
thank you.
recommend that to all of our listeners. Beth, what a joy to have you on. I'm so excited about your great resources. I've learned a lot today. I thank you for sharing your wisdom and expertise, and I wish you great success with the forthcoming book.
Thank you so much, Carolyn. It's been a wonderful pleasure chatting with you.
Well, thank you. And we'll talk again soon, I hope.
Yes, thank you.
Be well. And I want to thank my listeners for tuning into Your Working Life, where my goal is to help you design your career destiny so it doesn't happen by default. True career and life satisfaction is possible, and it's time to embrace what you love doing so you can do more of it. I'm Caroline Dowd-Higgins. Take good care.